200 years of failure sat in dusty files across 12 different archive rooms. Daniel Wright ran his fingers along the spines of physical data storage units, each one representing another species that had tried and given up. The research station on Drakmore hummed with the sound of environmental controls, but otherwise the archive felt like a tomb of abandoned hopes. "You are wasting your time." Commander Rilith's feathers rustled with what Daniel had learned to recognize as frustration. The avian officer stood in the doorway, her sharp eyes tracking his movements. Every species in the Galactic Council has sent their best. Telepaths, linguists, technology experts, even priests. The dragon is beautiful but empty. There is nothing inside that massive head but instinct. Daniel pulled out another file and opened it. The Zentari had tried musical frequencies. The Morlocks had attempted chemical communication. The Vosh had even built a neural interface that nearly killed their lead researcher when they tried to connect it to the dragon's brain. Every approach had failed. Every single one. Maybe everyone was asking the wrong questions, Daniel said quietly. Rilith made a clicking sound that translated as bitter amusement. The human thinks he is smarter than 2 centuries of galactic science. Your mentor warned me you had an ego. Dr. Tanaka said that. Daniel looked up, surprised. He said you had unshakable confidence in human intuition. He meant it as a compliment. I'm not sure I agree. Rilith moved closer, her talons clicking on the metal floor. 3 months. That is all the time I can give you. After that, we close this project permanently and turn Drakmore into a nature preserve. The council has better uses for research funding. After she left, Daniel sat alone with the files. He pulled up holographic footage of Ashmark, the dragon who had lived in the mountain valleys of this world since before any galactic species had achieved spaceflight. The creature was enormous, easily 100 meters from nose to tail. His scales looked like polished crystal in shades of deep amber and gold. When he moved, which was rarely, the ground itself seemed to tremble, but it was the eyes that caught Daniel's attention. Every researcher mentioned them. Molten gold, ancient, seemingly aware. Yet every brain scan showed only basic animal intelligence. No language centers, no complex reasoning, nothing that suggested consciousness as the galaxy understood it. Daniel watched the footage again and again. Ashmark stood on a cliff top, perfectly still for hours. Then, as the planetary seismographs recorded a minor tremor deep below, the dragon shifted his weight. Just slightly. Just enough. You moved before the tremor registered on sensors, Daniel whispered to the image. How did you know it was coming? He pulled up geological data and overlaid it with the dragon footage. A pattern emerged that made his heart race. Every time Ashmark moved, within minutes or hours, seismic activity occurred. The researchers had noted this, but dismissed it as coincidence or animal instinct, like birds sensing storms. Daniel thought about the failed neural interface. The Vosh had tried to connect to Ashmark's brain, looking for electrical signals like their own. But what if consciousness did not work that way for dragons? What if their awareness operated on a completely different principle? He spent the next week reviewing every scrap of data. Hiroshi Tanaka found him asleep at his desk on the 3rd day, surrounded by geological surveys and dragon observation logs. You look terrible, his mentor said, setting down 2 cups of something hot. When did you last eat? Hiroshi, look at this. Daniel pulled up a holographic display showing wave patterns. These are the natural resonance frequencies of Drakmore's tectonic plates. And these are the vibrations Ashmark scales produce when he breathes. They match. Not approximately. Exactly. Hiroshi studied the data for a long moment. You think the dragon is connected to the planet itself? I think everyone has been trying to talk to Ashmark like he is separate from this world. But what if he is not? What if he is part of it? Not standing on the mountain, but listening through it. That would explain why no communication method has worked. We have been shouting at him in languages he cannot hear. Hiroshi sipped his drink thoughtfully. But if you are right, how do we test it? I need to go into the field. I need to observe him directly, not through sensors and cameras. Rilith will never approve a close approach. The dragon has ignored everyone, but ignored is not the same as safe. Daniel closed the files and stood up. His legs protested after sitting so long. Then I will not ask for permission. I will ask for forgiveness later. The next morning, before most of the station woke, Daniel packed equipment and headed out. The path to Ashmark's Valley took 3 hours on foot. The terrain was rough, volcanic rock carved by ancient ice and recent earthquakes. As he climbed, Daniel felt the ground beneath his boots. Really felt it. Every small vibration, every tiny tremor. The planet was alive in ways he had never noticed on Earth. He reached the ridge overlooking Ashmark's preferred resting place as the sun climbed higher. The dragon lay coiled around a massive stone formation, his scales catching the light. From this distance, Daniel could see the gentle rise and fall of his breathing, could see the way his claws rested against bare rock, not random but deliberate. Daniel sat down and waited. He did not call out, did not activate any equipment. He simply watched and listened. After an hour, he placed his palms flat against the stone beneath him. The vibration was so subtle he almost missed it. A deep thrumming, far below the range of hearing, but felt in his bones. The planet's heartbeat. And beneath his hands, he felt something else. A rhythm. A pattern. Not chaotic, but organized, complex, beautiful. Ashmark's massive head lifted. Those golden eyes turned and focused directly on Daniel for the first time in recorded history. The dragon had noticed him. After 200 years of ignoring every species that came to study him, the ancient creature was looking at one human who sat quietly on stone. Daniel held his breath. He did not move. He kept his hands pressed to the rock and felt the vibrations flowing through it. The dragon watched him for 5 long minutes. Then slowly, deliberately, Ashmark placed his own massive head down against the stone formation he had coiled around. His scales shimmered. The vibrations in the rock changed, deepened, became more pronounced. That it was not speech. It was not any language Daniel knew, but it was communication. After 2 centuries of silence, the dragon was responding, not to technology or telepathy or grand gestures, but to one person who had stopped trying to speak and simply learned to listen. Daniel smiled and kept his hands on the stone, feeling the mountain carry messages between them. The ridicule started within days. Daniel had moved his entire research setup to a tent near Ashmark's Valley, and the other scientists thought he had lost his mind. He spent hours each day sitting on bare rock with his hands pressed to the ground, eyes closed, barely moving. To anyone watching, he looked like he was meditating rather than conducting serious research. The human has given up on science and turned to mysticism, one of the Morlockian researchers commented during dinner at the station. The dining hall erupted in clicking laughter. Hiroshi defended him when he could, but even his mentor looked worried during their video calls. Daniel's reports contained more geological data than linguistic analysis. He wrote about tectonic movements and magma flows instead of language patterns or cognitive responses. I know what this looks like, Daniel told Hiroshi during one conversation. But I'm onto something real. Ashmark is not ignoring me anymore. When I arrive each morning, he positions himself closer. When I match certain vibration patterns in the rock, his scales respond. Respond how? Hiroshi asked carefully. They shimmer. They change frequency. Hiroshi, his scales are not just armor. They are instruments, receivers and transmitters both. He is listening to the planet through them and talking to it. I think so. I think dragons experience time completely differently than we do. A conversation for Ashmark might take days or weeks. We have been expecting instant responses, but that is not how he works. Hiroshi was quiet for a moment. Commander Rilith is asking questions about your progress. She wants measurable results. Tell her, I need more time. Daniel, you've already used half of your 3 months. After the call ended, Daniel sat in his tent and reviewed his data. He had been collecting seismic readings, measuring the vibrations Ashmark produced, tracking patterns in how the dragon moved. Slowly, very slowly, a language was emerging. Not a language of words, but of resonance. Deep, sustained frequencies that traveled through stone. Quick, sharp vibrations that indicated urgency or attention. Complex harmonic patterns that seemed to carry emotional weight. The problem was speed. Ashmark operated on geological time. What seemed like a slow response to humans might be a rapid conversation for a dragon. Daniel needed a way to bridge that gap that he started building a translation matrix using the research station's equipment. It would take vibrations from the rock, speed them up or slow them down, and allow both parties to communicate across their different timescales. The theory was sound, but the engineering was beyond his expertise. That was when the help came from an unexpected source. A Zentari engineer named Rivek appeared at his tent one evening. "I heard you were building something impossible," Rivek said. His species communicated through color shifts in their skin, and a translator device converted it to speech. "I want to help. Why would you help me? Your people already decided the dragon was not worth studying." Rivek's skin flickered through shades of purple and blue. "My people are excellent at following established patterns. We're less good at seeing new ones. You are trying something none of us considered. Even if you fail, the attempt is worth documenting." Together, they worked on the resonance chamber. Rivek's engineering skills turned Daniel's rough theories into functional technology. Within 2 weeks, they had a prototype, a chamber that could receive vibrations from the ground, process them, and transmit responses at frequencies Ashmark could detect. The first test was simple. Daniel sat in the chamber with his hands on sensors connected to bedrock. He felt the subtle vibrations of the mountain and added his own pattern, a basic rhythm, matching one he had observed Ashmark using when the dragons seemed calm. For 3 hours, nothing happened. Then, so slowly that Daniel almost missed it, Ashmark moved. The massive dragon raised his head and turned toward Daniel's tent, nearly a kilometer away. His scales began to shimmer in a complex pattern that Daniel's equipment recorded and analyzed. "He heard you," Rivek whispered, his skin flashing bright yellow with excitement. "He actually heard you and responded." The response pattern was complex, layered with multiple frequencies. Daniel's translation matrix processed it, trying to find meaning. What emerged was not words, but something more fundamental. Awareness. Acknowledgement. The dragon equivalent of turning towards someone who had spoken your name. Daniel input another pattern, building on the first. This time, he tried to convey a question. "Are you aware? Do you understand?" Ashmark's response came faster, only an hour this time. The vibrations carried a sense of patience mixed with something that felt like curiosity. The dragon was treating this like someone learning to speak for the first time. Simple concepts, basic acknowledgement. Over the next month, Daniel and Ashmark developed a rudimentary vocabulary. It was nothing like human language. There were no words for objects or actions. Instead, the communication revolved around states of being. Stability, change, attention, rest, warning, calm. Each concept had a unique vibration signature that could be transmitted through stone. The breakthrough came when Daniel asked a more complex question. He transmitted a pattern that roughly meant, "Why do you stay here?" The response took 6 hours to arrive, and when it did, Daniel sat in stunned silence as the translation matrix processed layer after layer of meaning. Ashmark was not just living on this mountain. He was bonded to it, bound to it. The dragon's consciousness extended through the planetary crust. He felt every tremor, every shift, every movement of tectonic plates, and he responded to them, adjusting his position and his own vibrations to maintain stability. "He is not a creature living on a planet," Daniel said aloud, his voice shaking. "He is part of the planet's regulatory system. He has been preventing earthquakes." Rivek's skin cycled through colors too quickly for the translator to keep up. "For how long?" Daniel pulled up geological records going back thousands of years. Before Ashmark arrived, this region had experienced devastating seismic events every few centuries. After his arrival, the activity had become minimal, manageable, safe. "At least 5,000 years, Daniel said. "He has been protecting this world for 5,000 years. And every species that came here thought he was just a big animal." That night, Daniel transmitted a new pattern to Ashmark. It was clumsy and probably poorly formed, but he tried to express gratitude. "Thank you for keeping us safe." The dragon's response came before dawn. It was a harmonic pattern so beautiful that it made Daniel's eyes water. The translation matrix struggled with it, but the emotional content was clear. Loneliness, relief, joy at finally being understood. Ashmark had been waiting. All this time, the ancient guardian had been waiting for someone to hear him. News of Daniel's breakthrough spread through the Galactic Council channels within hours. What had been dismissed as a foolish human wasting time suddenly became the most important xenological discovery in decades. Scientists who had mocked his methods now requested access to his data. Commander Rilith called an emergency meeting with representatives from 7 different species. "This changes everything," she said, her feathers smooth with what Daniel recognized as awe. "If dragons are planetary guardians rather than simple creatures, we need to reevaluate every world where we have found them." Daniel stood before the assembled researchers, exhausted but energized. Ashmark has been alone for millennia. His species communicates across geological timescales. To him, our brief visits were like trying to have a conversation with mayflies. We lived so quickly that we barely registered as conscious beings. A Vosh researcher, the same species whose neural interface had nearly killed someone, spoke up. "Our scans showed no higher brain function. How is this possible?" "Because you were looking for electrical signals like your own," Daniel explained. "Dragon consciousness is not located in their brain. It is distributed through their entire body, through their scales, through their connection to the planet itself. They do not think the way we do. They resonate. They harmonize. They exist on a completely different level of awareness." Rivek, who now stood beside Daniel as an equal partner in the research, added his own analysis. "The vibration patterns we have recorded are more complex than any known language. A single transmission from Ashmark contains more information than this entire meeting, but it is compressed across time. He speaks in layers that take hours or days to fully unfold." Over the next weeks, Daniel refined his communication system with help from multiple species. The Zentari improved the resonance chamber's precision. The Morlocks contributed their understanding of chemical signals, which turned out to be another layer of dragon communication. Even the Vosh helped by mapping the way vibrations traveled through different types of rock. Through it all, Ashmark became more responsive. The dragon moved closer to the research station, though he never left the mountain range. He began initiating conversations, transmitting patterns when he sensed Daniel was near the resonance chamber. The communication was slow but growing richer with each exchange. Then one morning, Ashmark sent a pattern that made every sensor alarm activate simultaneously. The translation matrix processed it 3 times to confirm the meaning. "Danger. Deep danger. Attention required now." Daniel rushed to the chamber and transmitted a response. "What danger? Where?" The dragon's answer came in fragments, faster than his usual pace, but still maddeningly slow for human perception. "Something wrong beneath the surface. Unnatural disturbance. Balance disrupted." He had been compensating for weeks, adjusting his own vibrations to counteract the problem, but the situation was worsening. "Give me geological surveys of the deep mantle," Daniel ordered. Rivek and a team of researchers scrambled to pull data. What they found made Daniel's blood run cold. Deep beneath the inhabited valleys, someone had established mining operations. Not surface mining, which was legal and regulated, but deep core extraction, drilling into the precise points where tectonic plates met and balanced. Whoever was doing this either did not care about the consequences or actively wanted to destabilize the planet. Commander Rilith immediately contacted the Galactic Council Enforcement Division. Within a day, a warship arrived in orbit. But the situation was more complicated than anyone had hoped. The mining operation belonged to a corporation called Helix Extraction, known for exploiting legal loopholes and working in gray areas of galactic law. "They have permits," the warship captain explained during a briefing. "Technically, they are within their rights. The permits were issued before we understood that Ashmark was a sentient guardian. Revoking them now will take months of legal proceedings." "We do not have months," Daniel said urgently. "Ashmark is exhausting himself trying to hold the tectonic plates stable. He's been doing their job for them, preventing the earthquakes their mining would naturally cause. But he is reaching his limit. How long until he cannot maintain it?" Rilith asked. Daniel consulted with Ashmark through the resonance chamber. The dragon's response was grim. Days, perhaps less. The strain was enormous. He had prevented 12 separate collapse events in the last week alone. Each one took more energy than the last. 3 days maximum, Daniel translated. After that, Ashmark will fail. When he does, 7 tectonic plates will shift simultaneously. The earthquake will be catastrophic. It will destroy the research station, 3 inhabited valleys, and kill thousands. The warship captain shook his head. Even if I had authority to shut down the mining operation by force, we have another problem. They have installed fail-safe devices. If their equipment is suddenly powered down or destroyed, it will trigger immediate destabilization. It is designed to prevent hostile takeover. If we force them to stop, we cause the very disaster we're trying to prevent. Everyone in the room fell silent. The problem seemed impossible. They needed to stop the mining, but could not do it quickly. They needed to stabilize the planet, but lacked the technology. They needed time, but had none. Daniel looked at the data flowing from Ashmark's position. The dragon was in constant communication now, not with humans, but with the planet itself. He was singing to the stone, holding it together through pure force of will and his species' unique connection to geological forces. An idea began forming in Daniel's mind. Dangerous, probably insane, but maybe their only option. What if we could coordinate with Ashmark directly? Daniel said slowly. Not just communicate, but work together. If we slowly withdraw the mining equipment from each critical point, one at a time, while Ashmark adjusts his support and we install artificial stabilizers, we might be able to do this safely. That would require maintaining constant communication with the dragon for at least 72 hours, Rivek said. The resonance chamber is not designed for sustained use. The neural feedback alone would be dangerous. I know, Daniel said, but it is the only way. Someone needs to act as the bridge between dragon time and human time. Someone needs to translate fast enough to coordinate engineers and Ashmark simultaneously. Hiroshi, who had been listening via communication link, spoke up. Daniel, you cannot do this. The strain would be immense. You could suffer permanent neurological damage. Daniel looked at the readings from Ashmark. The ancient guardian was in pain, exhausting himself to protect beings who had ignored him for centuries. He had been alone for millennia, waiting for someone to understand. Now that someone finally did, how could Daniel refuse to help? This is what humans do, Daniel said quietly. We bridge gaps. We connect things that seem impossible to connect. Ashmark has been protecting this world for 5,000 years. The least I can do is help him for 3 days. Commander Rilith studied him for a long moment. You understand you might not survive this? I understand. Daniel met her sharp avian eyes. But thousands will definitely not survive if we do nothing. Give me the best medical team you have. Get engineers to all 7 critical points. And get helix extraction to cooperate, by force if necessary. The warship captain nodded slowly. We can make them cooperate. The question is whether you can hold the connection long enough. Daniel returned to the resonance chamber and placed his hands on the sensors. He transmitted a pattern to Ashmark. Trust me. Work with me. Together we can fix this. The dragon's response carried a weight that translated as something close to hope. The medical team wired Daniel into more monitoring equipment than seemed necessary for one human body. Hiroshi supervised the setup personally, his face tight with worry. Around them, the enhanced resonance chamber hummed with power, ready to maintain a connection that no one had ever attempted before. Your heart rate must stay below 160, the Morlockian doctor explained, her multiple limbs adjusting sensors with practiced precision. Above that, you risk cardiac failure. We will have sedatives ready if your neural activity spikes too high, but using them means breaking the connection, which means failure, Daniel said, which means people die. So we do not use sedatives. Daniel, be reasonable, Hiroshi started. I'm being reasonable. This is the only way. Daniel settled into the chamber, his hands already reaching for the enhanced contact points. Are the engineering teams in position? Rivek checked his displays. All 7 points confirmed. They are ready to work on your signal. The Helix extraction crews are cooperating under military supervision. They are not happy, but they will withdraw equipment as instructed. And Ashmark, his vibration patterns show he is aware of what we are attempting. I believe he understands the plan. Daniel closed his eyes and opened himself to the connection. Immediately, the world transformed. What had been subtle vibrations became a roaring symphony of sensation. He felt the entire planetary crust as if it were his own skin. Every fault line, every pocket of magma, every place where stone ground against stone. And at the center of it all, holding everything together through sheer determination, was Ashmark. The dragon's consciousness was vast, ancient, deeper than any ocean and more patient than erosion. Daniel felt himself becoming small by comparison, a brief spark against the slow burning of geological time. But then Ashmark noticed him, and the dragon's awareness focused. Daniel transmitted his first real message since fully connecting. "I am here. Show me where we start." Ashmark's response flooded through him. Not words, not even concepts, but pure information. Daniel saw through the dragon's perception. 7 critical points where mining equipment had created weak spots in the planetary stability. Ashmark had been supporting each one individually, a constant juggling act of redistributing pressure and absorbing seismic energy. He was exhausted on a level Daniel had never imagined possible. Point 1. Daniel transmitted to the engineering team, his voice rough. Northwest quadrant, depth markers matching the survey data. Begin equipment withdrawal at 5% power reduction per minute. The team acknowledged and began their work. Through his connection with Ashmark, Daniel felt the mining equipment power down incrementally. Immediately, pressure began building in the fault line. The dragon compensated, shifting his focus, humming a deep vibration that traveled through kilometers of rock to stabilize the point. But it was not enough. The artificial support needed to be installed before the pressure became critical. Daniel felt Ashmark straining, felt the dragon pulling energy from reserves that were nearly empty. Faster, Daniel transmitted to the engineers. "Install the stabilizer now. We need 2 more minutes for proper anchoring," came the response. "You do not have 2 minutes. Install it now, or the point collapses." Something in Daniel's voice must have convinced them. He heard the rapid commands, felt through Ashmark's senses as the artificial stabilizer locked into place. It was crude compared to the dragon's elegant solution, but it held. The pressure eased. Point 1 was secure. Point 6 more to go. Daniel's body was already protesting. His head pounded with pressure. His heart raced. Blood vessels in his nose ruptured from the strain, and he tasted copper. The medical monitors screamed warnings that Hiroshi muted to keep Daniel focused. Point 2 went smoother. Daniel was learning to process information at both timescales simultaneously. He existed in human speed, giving commands and coordinating teams. But he also existed in dragon time, feeling the slow shift of continental plates and the deep breath of magma chambers. The 2 states of being should have been incompatible. Instead, Daniel found a strange harmony between them. Ashmark helped, lending him strength in ways Daniel did not fully understand. The dragon's patience became his patience. The ancient guardian's endurance became his endurance. They were not separate anymore. They were a bridge, one consciousness spanning 2 utterly different forms of existence. Points 3 and 4 followed. Each successful stabilization gave them more confidence. The engineers worked with increasing efficiency. The Helix extraction crews, seeing the scope of what they had nearly caused, stopped resisting and began actively helping. Even the warship captain contributed, using his ship's sensors to monitor stress patterns and warn of unexpected complications. Then they reached point 5, and everything went wrong. Point 1 of the Helix crew, angry at being forced to dismantle his work, sabotaged his own equipment. Instead of powering down gradually, the mining drill surged to maximum power and then died completely. The sudden shock sent a seismic wave through the fault line that Ashmark could not absorb. The dragon roared. Not with his voice, which had not been used in centuries, but with his entire being. The mountain itself screamed. Daniel, fully connected, experienced the roar as if his own body was tearing apart. He felt Ashmark making an impossible choice. The dragon could let point 5 collapse and save his strength for the remaining points. The localized earthquake would kill hundreds, but thousands would survive. Or he could stop the collapse, but it would require tapping into his own life force. If he did that, he might not have enough strength left to finish the job. Ashmark chose to save everyone. Daniel felt the dragon's essence, the fundamental energy that made him a living being, begin to drain into the stone. It was not just effort anymore. It was sacrifice. Ashmark was dying to hold the planet together. Daniel transmitted, putting everything he had into the message. Not yet. Hold on. Trust me. We can fix this. But Ashmark's response was fading. The ancient guardian was giving up everything to prevent disaster. His consciousness, so vast and patient, was dimming like a star collapsing into nothing. Daniel made his own impossible choice. He stopped dividing his awareness between timescales. Instead, he pushed entirely into dragon time, forcing his human consciousness to operate at geological speeds. It should have killed him instantly. The human brain was not designed for that kind of processing. But Daniel had always been stubborn, and he had a dragon lending him strength. He felt his own body in the chamber having seizures. Heard alarms screaming. Heard Hiroshi shouting for medical intervention. But Daniel ignored it all. He took the burden from Ashmark, holding point 5 stable through his own while shouting commands to the engineering team. Emergency stabilizers now. Maximum deployment. Do not wait for proper anchoring, just get them in place. Rivek's voice, tight with fear, but steady. Deploying now. The stabilizers locked in. Crude, imperfect, but enough. Point 5 held. The strain released. Ashmark stopped draining his life force and instead drew back, recovering what he could. Daniel returned to normal consciousness and immediately vomited blood. His vision tunneled. Every nerve in his body felt like it was on fire. But they had done it. Point 5 was secure, and Ashmark was still alive. Point 2 more points remained, and Daniel was not sure he could survive reaching them. Hiroshi was arguing with the medical team about whether to force Daniel out of the chamber. Through the haze of pain, Daniel heard his mentor's voice rising to a shout. The Morlockian doctor wanted to sedate him immediately. Every biological reading showed Daniel should not be conscious, much less functioning. If you sedate him now, thousands die, Hiroshi said, though his voice shook. Including us. We are in one of those valleys. Daniel forced his eyes open. 2 more points. I could do 2 more. You cannot even sit up straight, the doctor said. Your brain is hemorrhaging. Your heart has already stopped twice and restarted on its own. This is insanity. This is necessary. Daniel reached for the contact sensors again. His hand was shaking so badly that Rivek had to help position them. Ashmark gave everything for this world. I can give 3 more hours. Through the connection, he felt the dragon's concern. Ashmark had recovered some strength after point 5 was stabilized, but he was monitoring Daniel now as much as the planet. The ancient guardian was worried about his human friend, could sense Daniel's body failing. Stop if you must, Ashmark transmitted. Your life is brief, but precious. Do not throw it away for this. Daniel smiled despite the blood in his mouth. That is exactly what you were doing. Why should I be different? The dragon's response carried something that felt like affection mixed with resignation. You humans burn so bright and so quickly. Very well. Let's finish this together. Point 6 began. The engineering team at that location had learned from Point 5's near disaster. They had triple-checked every system, positioned emergency backups, and coordinated their timing down to the second. When Daniel gave the word, the withdrawal went smoothly. Ashmark held the stress, Daniel coordinated the teams, and the stabilizers deployed exactly when needed. But the effort cost Daniel dearly. He felt something in his brain give way, a blood vessel or neural pathway pushed beyond its limit. His left side went numb. His vision in one eye went dark. The medical monitors showed readings that should have meant death. 1 more, Daniel whispered. Just 1 more point. Hiroshi gripped his shoulder. Daniel, You have done enough. Let someone else finish. There is no one else. I am the only one connected to Ashmark. I am the only bridge. Daniel tried to focus his remaining good eye on his mentor. You taught me that sometimes knowledge requires sacrifice. You taught me that understanding another species is worth risk. Did you mean it? Hiroshi's face crumpled. Not like this. I never meant like this. But you did mean it. And you were right. Daniel turned back to the sensors. Point 7. Last one. Then we can rest. Both of us. He felt Ashmark gathering his own remaining strength. The dragon was exhausted beyond anything in his 5,000-year memory. But he had tasted hope for the first time in millennia. He had found a friend in a creature whose entire lifespan was barely a heartbeat to dragon perception. He was not going to let that friend die alone. The dragon transmitted a pattern that took Daniel a moment to understand. It was not information about the planet or the critical points. It was a memory. Ashmark sharing something from his deep past, a time before he was alone, when others of his kind existed, when dragons gathered and sang to each other across continents, their vibrations creating harmonies that shaped the planets they guarded. You are not alone either, Daniel transmitted back. Not anymore. Whatever happens, someone heard you. Someone understood. Point 7 was the deepest critical point, closest to the mantle boundary. The mining equipment there had done the most damage and would be the hardest to withdraw. The engineering team had their best specialists positioned, but even they sounded nervous on the communications channel. Daniel opened himself fully to the connection one last time. He stopped fighting the double consciousness and instead embraced it. Human and dragon, fast and slow, brief and eternal. He existed in both states at once, and for a moment, it was beautiful rather than painful. Begin withdrawal, he transmitted. The equipment powered down. Immediately, pressure spiked. The fault line wanted to slip, wanted to release centuries of accumulated stress in one catastrophic movement. Ashmark pushed back with everything he had, singing to the stone in frequencies that resonated through the entire planet. But it was not enough. The pressure kept building. Point 7 was too damaged, too unstable. Even with Ashmark's power and Daniel's coordination, the artificial stabilizers would not hold against this much force. We are losing it, the chief engineer reported. The stabilizers are buckling. We need to evacuate the area. No, Daniel thought. Not after coming this far. Not after Ashmark gave everything. He felt the dragon's resignation. They had tried. They had saved 6 points. Perhaps that would be enough to minimize the disaster. Thousands would still die, but not tens of thousands. Daniel refused to accept it. There had to be another way. He pushed deeper into the connection with Ashmark, searching for something they had missed. As he did, he felt other presences. Faint, distant, but there. Other dragons on other worlds, alerted by Ashmark's roar at point 5. They were too far away to help physically, but they were aware. They were listening, and in that moment, Daniel understood something fundamental. Dragons were connected across space as well as time. They were part of a network, a web of consciousness spanning the galaxy. Ashmark had been cut off from it for so long he had forgotten. But it was still there. Daniel, operating on pure instinct, opened their connection wider. He let it extend beyond just Ashmark and himself. He reached for those distant dragon presences and showed them what was happening, not with words or concepts, but with the pure emotional truth. Danger. Help needed. Friend in trouble. The response was immediate. 47 dragons across as many worlds sent their strength. It was not physical force. They were too far away for that. But they sent their knowledge, their experience, their ancient wisdom about stabilizing planets. They sent their support to Ashmark, letting him know he was not alone anymore. Ashmark, bolstered by his distant kin, sang a new pattern. Daniel coordinated it with the engineering team. The stabilizers locked in place. Point 7 held, not perfectly, but enough. The pressure equalized. The danger passed. Daniel felt himself falling away from the connection. His body had nothing left to give. As consciousness faded, he felt Ashmark catch him, cradling his awareness gently. The dragon's vast presence surrounded him like a warm blanket, Rest now, small friend. You have earned peace. I will guard your dreams as I guard this world. Daniel's last thought before darkness took him was that he had succeeded, not just at stabilizing the planet, but at something more important. He had connected beings that had been alone for far too long. He had built a bridge across the deepest gaps imaginable. His body seized one final time in the chamber, and then went still. Daniel woke to the sound of stone humming, not the artificial vibrations of medical equipment, though there was plenty of that too. Real stone, carrying a melody that resonated in his bones. He tried to open his eyes and found only one would respond. The other was covered in bandages, along with most of his head. "Do not try to move," Hiroshi said from somewhere nearby. "You have been unconscious for 6 days. Your body needs time to heal." Did it work? Daniel's voice came out as a rasp. His throat felt like someone had filled it with broken glass. All 7 points are stable. The mining equipment has been fully removed, and Helix Extraction is facing criminal charges. The inhabited valleys are safe. Hiroshi moved into Daniel's limited field of vision, and Daniel saw his mentor had aged years in less than a week. "You nearly died. Your heart stopped 4 times during the procedure. You had 3 strokes. Your brain is scarred in ways the doctors have never seen before. But I am alive. Barely. You will never fully recover. The neural damage is permanent." Hiroshi's voice cracked. "You can still hear them, can you not? The vibrations." Daniel realized he was still perceiving the world through multiple layers. He felt the gentle tremors of the planet, heard the deep song of tectonic plates settling into new equilibrium. And underneath it all, a familiar presence watching over him. "Ashmark," Daniel whispered. The stone hummed in response, a pattern that needed no translation. "Welcome back, friend. You were deeply missed." Over the next weeks, Daniel learned the extent of his changes. His left side would always be weak. His vision would never return to one eye. He experienced phantom vibrations constantly, his nervous system permanently rewired to perceive geological frequencies. Walking on bare ground sometimes overwhelmed him with sensation. He could feel earthquakes days before they registered on instruments, but he was alive, and so was Ashmark. The dragon had recovered his strength, no longer needing to hold the planet together alone. The artificial stabilizers worked adequately, and natural geological processes were gradually taking over. More importantly, Ashmark was no longer isolated. The connection Daniel had opened to other dragons remained. Commander Rilith visited Daniel in the medical facility. Her feathers were arranged in a pattern that indicated respect. The Galactic Council wants to send human xenolinguists to the other 47 dragon worlds. They are requesting volunteers specifically. "How many have volunteered?" Daniel asked. 300 applications in the first day. Everyone wants to be the next Daniel Wright. She tilted her head in the avian equivalent of a smile. Though the council hopes the next ones will use slightly less dangerous methods. Rivet came by often, bringing updates on the resonance chamber technology. Other species were adapting it for different forms of communication. The Zentari had made contact with a crystalline species that communicated through light refraction. The Morlocks had opened dialogue with a silicon-based life form that existed in frozen methane. Every success traced back to the principle Daniel had proven. Consciousness could take forms no one expected, but the visitor Daniel waited for most came on the morning he was cleared to leave the medical facility. Hiroshi wheeled him outside, where Ashmark waited. The dragon had traveled from his mountain valley for the first time in recorded history. Drawn by concern for his friend up close, Ashmark was even more magnificent than Daniel remembered. His scales caught the light like living amber. His eyes, ancient and patient, focused on Daniel with an intensity that would have frightened most people. But Daniel felt only warmth. "Hello, old friend," Daniel said aloud, knowing Ashmark would feel the vibrations of his voice through the ground. The dragon lowered his massive head until it was level with Daniel's wheelchair. His breath smelled of stone and minerals and deep earth. When he transmitted his response, every human at the research station felt it as a gentle tremor. "You gave much of yourself for this world and for me. How can I repay such a gift?" You already have, Daniel said. You taught me patience. You showed me beauty in slowness. You reminded me that consciousness does not have to look like mine to be real and worthy of respect. Ashmark's scales shimmered through complex patterns. I have a proposal. If you are willing. Daniel waited, feeling the dragon gather his thoughts at their characteristic slow pace. Stay here. Live nearby. Be my permanent companion and translator. The council sends others to speak with my distant kin, but I would have you here. Your life is brief by my reckoning, but I would treasure every moment of it. Daniel felt tears forming in his working eye. I will be honored, but I am broken now. I cannot even walk properly. What use would I be? You are not broken. You are transformed. You exist in both our worlds now, human and dragon. Fast and slow. You are unique in all the galaxy. The dragon shifted his position, a movement that took several minutes but radiated contentment. Besides, I have been alone for 5,000 years. A few decades of true companionship seems more than fair to S.O. Daniel stayed. The research station became his permanent home, and he became Ashmark's bridge to the faster world. When scientists needed to communicate with the dragon, they came to Daniel. When decisions needed to be made about planetary management, Daniel facilitated the discussions. When tourists came to see the magnificent dragon of Drakmor, Daniel told them the real story. Not of a mindless creature, but of an ancient guardian who had waited millennia for someone to understand. In the evenings, Daniel would sit on the ridge overlooking Ashmark's valley. The dragon would rest nearby, close enough that Daniel could feel the vibrations of his breathing through the stone. They would share observations about the day, Daniel speaking of quick human concerns, Ashmark responding with deep geological wisdom. Other humans came and went. Hiroshi stayed for 2 years before age forced him to return to Earth, proud of what his student had accomplished. Rivek visited annually, always bringing improvements to the resonance technology. Commander Rilith eventually retired and was replaced by a human coordinator who understood the importance of the Dragon Project. But Daniel remained, a permanent fixture of Drakmor. He aged as humans do, his hair turning white, his body growing frilier despite the best medical care. To Ashmark, this was the blink of an eye. But the dragon treasured every moment, knowing how precious brief things could be done on other worlds. Other humans were making contact with other dragons. The galaxy was learning that its guardians had been waiting, patient and lonely, for someone to hear them. Each success validated what Daniel had proven. That communication required not superior technology or force of will, but the humility to listen and adapt. 40 years after his arrival on Drakmor, Daniel knew his time was ending. His body, scarred from his sacrifice so long ago, was finally giving out. He asked to be taken to Ashmark's valley one last time. The dragon knew before anyone told him. He had felt Daniel's vibrations weakening over the past months, watched as his friend's brief flame dimmed. When Daniel arrived, Ashmark was waiting. "Thank you," Daniel said, his voice barely a whisper but carried through stone. "Thank you for letting me know you. Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for being my friend." Ashmark's response, with a harmony that every dragon across the galaxy felt and echoed. It spoke of gratitude, of loss, of the beauty found in ephemeral things. It honored Daniel not as a human who had helped a dragon, but as a true companion worthy of remembrance. Daniel closed his eyes and let himself rest against the warm stone. He felt Ashmark's presence surrounding him, felt the deep heartbeat of the planet, felt the echoes of 47 dragons singing their farewell across light years. His last thought was that he had done it. He had heard what others said with silence. He had built bridges across impossible gaps. He had proven that no being should ever be left alone and unheard. When his heart finally stopped, Ashmark sang. The dragon's grief resonated through the mountain, and for just a moment, every sentient being on Drakmor felt it. They understood, perhaps for the first time, what had been accomplished here. A human had given everything to understand, and in doing so, had changed the galaxy forever. Daniel Wright was buried on the ridge overlooking Ashmark's valley. The dragon visited the grave every day, a massive presence keeping watch over his small friend's resting place. And sometimes, in the deep places of stone where vibrations carried meaning, Ashmark would transmit a pattern meant only for Daniel. A memory, a thank you, a promise that he would never forget the brief, bright creature who had taught an ancient dragon what it meant to truly be heard.